I will give you my address. You're welcome
This
to
meeting is being recorded.
come by.
Well, I think that is Kate giving us the official okay to start with the presentation. So yes, for those that have been with us for kind of the pre-meeting prep, thank you for joining us. And yes, everyone is invited to, if you're in the Cleveland Heights area, to come see the sneaker ball tomorrow at Tiff's house. Jayla would love an audience, which I think is actually just a perfect segue into introducing you, Tiff. We, as everyone hopefully knows or may know, my name is Kristen Glazer, and I'm the Senior Manager of Donor Relations here at the Food Bank. Also, just want to give a quick shout out to my team who is behind the scenes doing all the logistics right now over in the room right next to me. So Kate, Kathy, Ben, Carrie, thank you for everything that you all do to make this run. And our guest host, our guest with us today is Tiffany Scruggs, who is the Vice President of Client Services. And Tiff has been with the food bank for several years now, but really has 20 years of experience with nonprofits and really just grassroots community work. If anyone has heard of the organization Family Connections, Tiff is actually a board member over at Family Connections and is also involved in leadership roles in several other prominent organizations across Northeast Ohio. If you were here with us for the earlier chat, you got a sneak peek into Tiff is a mother of two, Jayla and Junior, and is a very proud mama, as she should be, but it's always just a wonderful reminder that she is a mother first. And so just want to give a shout out to all the moms, especially with it being Mother's Day just a few weeks ago. Happy belated Mother's Day to you. Also, if you are an aunt or a grandma, extra special kudos to you as well, because we know that we could not do it with without those aunties and without those grandmas. So thank you. But Tiff, is there anything else that you want to share that I may have forgotten at
No,
all? Or
thank you, Glazer, and thanks to the entire team, and happy Thursday to everyone on Zoom. I also like to reference, just in terms of sharing why I'm able to really empathize with those that we serve, in addition to accessing food pantries in the past, particularly around the University of Toledo as a college student in the late 90s and early 2000s. I also accessed SNAP as a college student. And so I'm able to really provide that personal testimony. And I just like to speak to that. So that also helps change the narrative for those of you who might not be familiar with public benefits and who you really understand the recipient to be. I like for individuals to just understand that it's not your traditional queen of welfare. And we can talk more about that later on. So really glad to be here today. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction.
of course, thanks so much, Tiff, and thanks so much for sharing that as well. College hunger, especially, I think, is something that is starting to get a little bit more traction in understanding around in terms of just larger conversations. And I know that we actually have some colleges that we have pantries with and that we partner with in the community. So thank you just so much for just sharing your personal story. And I think it just adds to just the validity as well as just kind of passion behind your work and everything that you and your team do. So thank you for that. The one other thing that I did not mention is for anyone that is on the computer, please, if you have any questions, feel free to send them along in the chat, and we will get to those towards the end of the conversation. Whether you have any questions right now or as the conversation goes on, please use that chat feature. And then for folks that are in person, there's little tidbits of paper that you can actually write on, and someone will be able to answer those. So it's also an open invitation if anyone would like to come in person in the future. We do have a hybrid format going on. We had Mary with us last time and was able to go for a tour afterwards, and it was a really engaging time. So that is always an open invitation, but please do keep these questions coming. The reason why we do these things is just because we want to make sure that we're showing folks exactly how your support is being utilized. And when I say support, I mean monetary support, the time. We have so many volunteers that are on here as well as just general advocacy for the food bank. So if there's anything that you are wondering, now is a great opportunity to ask it during here. But to kind of move a little bit forward, Tiff, do you mind just giving a brief overview of your team and the client services team and everything that you guys do? I know it's a lot.
Sure, that's perfectly fine. And I will just make mention in terms of how we interact and work departmentally at the food bank. I know some of you recently heard from colleagues Diana Davitt, who serves as our director of programs, who operates our children nutrition initiatives, and also some of our large distribution efforts, along with Von Treese Jones, who serves as our director of advocacy, agency services in terms of support to our seniors and also to pantries and hot meal partners throughout our 6 counties that we serve. So I interact and provide support to those team members. But in addition, the client services component, or we like to call it our community engagement or neighbor engagement, has really taken off nicely. And so that's primarily a lot of the conversation today as we move forward. So we like to call ourselves the HOT team, which is Help Center Outreach Team, which is our benefits outreach approach. We're a food bank in the state of Ohio and across all 200 food banks across the Feeding America network that is categorized as one of the high performing benefits outreach teams because we operate and staff 25 full-time individuals, where there are some food banks that solely operate on volunteer support. And so we have made investments. Thank you all for your support in terms of operating this work for 10 years, as this is our 10th year that we've celebrated our neighbor engagement approach, in addition to the distribution of food. We recognize and we've been a part of national discussions and also collaborations to test different approaches for neighbors when accessing food. How do we engage individuals to really address the root causes of hunger? And so we have been a part of establishing approaches that are really neighbor friendly, also coupled with connectivity to resources that are focused in employment, housing, and healthcare, which serve as the 3 main drivers of food insecurity. And I apologize, I'm at the Euclid Pantry, which you're going to learn about in about 5 minutes, which is our latest venture and approach to the pandemic, as we opened up a neighborhood pantry, which allows our neighbors to shop, which really reduces stigma, which really allows our neighbors to feel welcoming and also to have access to other partners, as I've just recently described. So that is in a nutshell kind of how TIF fits into the food bank pie, but definitely work with all departments. Something critically important that Glazer and team we work with is really telling the story of those that we serve. And so I think it's important to understand our efforts as an organization and really the powerful movement that we take in terms of having a seat at the approach model, seat at the table approach, which allows neighbors to be at the decision-making tables and have input on not only food access, but to other barriers in terms of accessing community resources and those critical resources that they need for their families to thrive.
Thanks so much, Tiff. And something that is, I know that all of us mention it quite a bit, is just those root causes of hunger, the root drivers of hunger, the housing, healthcare, and employment/income. Yes. I always kind of describe it as a Venn diagram, and hunger is not an isolated issue. Hunger is not the only circle on that Venn diagram. But housing, healthcare, and employment/income really are the 3 root causes. Do you mind just kind of going in a little bit more of why are those the root causes of hunger and how do we address that?
Absolutely. So, from feedback that we've learned from individuals, I will just give you kind of a timeline organizationally. When we first started our program 10 years ago, we really were heavily focused on connecting our neighbors or our visitors to our partner organizations and to the food bank solely to SNAP, which stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps. But we recognized that by connecting individuals to those critical resources, we were also finding ourselves helping to connect to other needs based on the conversations and the intake processes that we have. And so we then, about 5 years ago, began to develop strategic relationships with organizations such as Towards Employment, who focus heavily on career prep and employment support. Housing, we know that housing stock, and I will use the word affordable housing. Affordable housing can be defined in a variety of ways, but for the purposes of this discussion and for our work, we're focused on individuals who have the same income eligibility as those that receive food. So that's about 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. For a family of 3, it's about $36,000, to give you a sense. And we also focus on healthcare. We understand that health and access to food, healthy food items go hand in hand. And so we began to establish critical relationships to be co-located throughout various healthcare partner organizations such as Metro, Cleveland Clinic. We've definitely pre-pandemic been at a variety of places. So we understood and have access to individuals to help move the needle. We've actually tracked individuals in terms of once they garner that support from our team. At first, we saw an increase of visits to our partner network, which is great. That means they're getting their need met in terms of receiving food. But then as time went on and more deeper services were received from our team, we saw a decrease because of the resource connectivity that we're able to help a household at a time. So, for example, some impact that we're happy to share along the way, we've been able to encourage and inspire families and connect with uh, Cleveland Housing Network, for example, to explore and are now homeowners. That is the type of impact, long lasting impact that our community members so deserve. Another component that has been creeping up in addition to employment, housing, and healthcare connectivities, is around financial resources. We understand that it's important for our neighbors and for all of us. You have to have credit, positive credit, in order to access and really have access to home ownership, to loans, to different things throughout society. So we've been able to group with national organizations who help individuals create or build a safety net. That is defined by having at least $500 in savings. So, in the event of an emergency, neighbors don't have to rely on systems necessarily. They can rely on their own funding stream to make sure that they're able to meet that emergency. So, we've been a part of that national strategies to test and understand what would work locally here in Cleveland and for our 6 county service area. And that is where we are today, which we're excited about all the lessons and things that we've learned and really able to speak to other organizations about our reach. We know that last year, if we served 343,000 people, that at least 25% of those individuals had an opportunity to engage with our team, whether it's through our call center model, whether it's in person through our benefits outreach counselor, or even through us receiving healthcare referrals through Unite Us, which is an online platform for those healthcare organizations to send referrals directly to the food bank. So I will say our reach, we would be remiss if we didn't have this approach. Since food banks have been around for 41 years and hunger still exists, we have our work cut out the next 41 years in terms of trying a different strategy.
Well, just the growth that the Help Center has had. You had mentioned briefly that we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of the Help Center. And maybe I put the cart before the horse a little bit in terms of really going down the avenue of the root causes of hunger. But would you want to share just kind of some of the highlights that have come in just this short decade of time? It's really, really impressive. And like you said, a long ways to go still, but
still a long ways to go, but absolutely. I will say, for us, when we started, we didn't have a call center. We just had individuals who were out to make those in-person, face-to-face connections. And while that's a great approach, we also understood and very mindful of those neighbors within our surrounding counties of Ashtabula, Lake, Jaga, and we are mindful of the rural challenges in terms of location and also proximity to those assets or resources. And so we quickly began to plan to operate a call center. And that is where we've been coined as trailblazers in that area and the largest nonprofit organization in the state of Ohio based on our scale and capacity. We've been able to offer this service to individuals via call center, which has allowed for them to remain anonymous. We know many of our seniors have shared that they love the ability to not have individuals see their face when they ask for help because of the stigma that's associated. We're also mindful of transportation barriers. So we understand having a call center has allowed us to mitigate that. And that really has been dissolved, if null and void, because of being able to operate a help center where we're open 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And we work with our local 211. So when we're not open, their calls go directly to our 211 so that individuals can still have a access point to receive those critical benefits via phone.
Yeah, And Tiff, everything that you just shared, there's just so much partnership there. In terms of the state of Ohio, in terms of even before when you had mentioned a little bit of the partnership with Feeding America and really that
Yes.
household empowerment grant of really being trailblazers across the country of having a help center, and then really helping to determine that strategy. And then 211, in case anyone doesn't know that, also with United Way. So it's really not just the Cleveland Food Bank. There's lots of great organizations doing similar work in similar areas that we're able to really lean on their expertise.
Very much so. And I will say just the spirit of, nonprofits, but the way of the world. Collaboration is a must. And we can't do everything on our own, right? So we understand that there are other organizations that have areas of specialty, and it only makes sense. We know that funders and foundations are always wondering about partnerships. And I think for us, since we've operated and partner with already over 1,000 different sites to help execute and distribute food, we would be remiss to not have that same spirit for this approach as well.
Absolutely. So we have the really kind of two parts of the help center. We have the folks that are out in the community as well as those that are taking the calls over the phone, which has really been a great two-prong approach. Going back to kind of that Venn diagram that we talked about, so housing, healthcare, and employment/income, what are some of the ways that they just learn about that someone may need help or assistance with one of those, and how do they go about determining that? Kind of walk us through the process. So if someone calls in, what does that really look like for someone?
Sure. So generally, everything that we do, and I'm sure if you've received any materials from us, you will notice the help center number, which is our call center, on all materials, on all of our fleet trucks. So driving around our 6 counties and through the state and through the communities, it always directs attention to the call center. So for us, when a neighbor calls in, it's simple. We ask, are you interested in locating free food resources? But we also it's more of a conversation. What leads you to making the phone call today? Some individuals, you can tell they're in a hurry and they only want to understand how to access a food resource. But we've built those questions in to understand. We always want to know if our neighbors are accessing public benefits. That is then where we're able to help walk them through the options in terms of what the state of Ohio has to offer, whether it's Medicaid, which is the free health insurance, if they're seniors, Medicare savings, so that they can have dollars directly deposited into their accounts to help offset some of those medical expenses. Cash assistance is another one for those neighbors who are in transition and need just a little boost of financial support. And as I mentioned, SNAP, which is food stamps. So from that conversation, if someone reports that they don't have income, because you have to have a certain income eligibility, which is actually a decrease from being eligible from receiving food from our feeding network, we will then take that opportunity to ask, are you interested in receiving information or being connected to an employment partner? That is very critical. We know that generally when you receive food and you're income eligible, there's that opportunity to learn about what else is available in terms of sustaining for you and your family. Through that conversation and introductory, resource moment, some of our neighbors get excited right then, and they were able to then connect them to a partner at one of our employment organizations. Or some people will say, let me think about it and I'll give you a call back. Or I'd like to make an in-person appointment where we invite them to come to the Greater Cleveland Food Bank or at a partner location, since those benefits outreach counselors, Glazer, that you described, their function in being out in the community, we're able to then coordinate an in-person engagement opportunity for those neighbors who have the desire to meet in face-to-face as well. I will tell you that there are sometimes additional opportunities in terms of connections that are sometimes seasonal. So we know that it's important for neighbors to have access to free taxes. Just tax season just ended. Hopefully, if you need an extension, that's fine as well. But our job was to really work with each and every person that we engage so that we can encourage them not to go to tax filing places that would strip away 20 to 30% of their return for those who were eligible. We were able to work directly with Enterprise Community Solutions, who serves as the largest free tax prep organization here locally. And we were able to do a direct connect process so that neighbors didn't have to hang up the phone. We were simply able to make sure that they were directed to a staff person while having a conversation with us to give you an idea of other ways that we've been able to connect our neighbors to services as well. So it's really through conversation. It's really about our team showing a level of empathy and listening. Listening is so critically important. There are times that we hear while we want to understand who's in your household. We know that currently there's a lot of two generation and sometimes three generational households. So being mindful in terms of seniors, individuals over the age of 60 who are usually generally unaware of the home improvement programs that they're eligible for example, so they can stay in their home. Can you imagine if you're not able to financially afford repairs that are needed, but you've lived in that home for 50 years? That's almost devastating to have to uproot and relocate just because you're not aware of where to access services. So that's just giving you an example of some of the supports, and we're happy to also provide a snapshot of a phone call as a follow-up if you think that will be helpful.
Thanks, Tiff. The work that you and your team do is just we try to share the story as much as we can, but I'm just so thankful that you're taking the time to talk today, because it is just, I mean, you guys have literally been called miracle workers.
Thank you.
Paul, my husband, Paul, is at a local public school, and him and I were talking about something, and I just happened to be working over in the help center. Tiff, I don't even know if I told you this yet. And had mentioned to Carolyn, our root cause coordinator, he had a family that had a really devastating fire, and they had to leave their home. And within a few days, Carolyn was able to help get them connected to housing in the area. And the kids were able to stay in school, and it was just a seamless transition. But without Carolyn in particular in making that connection, this family had no idea what they were going to do. They had lost a pet in the fire. I mean, they were going through so many things. And then just talking, hey there, how are you?
Fine. How are you, Kristen?
And you know what, Glazer, I think it's so important for our supporters. Carolyn's actually here, and I can just kind of talk about, if that's okay, in terms of being a root cause coordinator and what that means for us. Carolyn was hired in as our first root cause coordinator position, which she provides case management. And so for those of you who are not in the social service arena, this means she's really peeling back layers with families that she works with to truly understand if you're eligible for food, what else is happening, and really going through the assessment process and really working with the family at least for 6 months is our goal. Now, we recognize that things happen, but the best practice approach is to work with families at a longer term strategy. And so the example that you mentioned in terms of locating housing for a family who had a fire is just one of many. And since you're here and walking past, I thought it would be helpful for you to just say hello and for us to just put a name with the face and the position and role. So Glazer, thank you for saying that. And I will say that Carolyn is now the way that we've transitioned to understand and really replicate the successes and impact. We now have 3 root cause coordinators. Carolyn's focused on families. We have a root cause coordinator focused on seniors, and we also have a root cause coordinator focused on healthcare partnerships to really manage those referrals that I referenced earlier in terms of receiving those from Unite Us. So I wanted to just say hi, give Carolyn a shout out, and thank you for all that you do. Carolyn was a part of today. We actually hosted what's called a correspondence work group. We've been behind the scenes working statewide with the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services, which are really the conveners of public benefits and the administrative body. They're wanting to know from Cleveland team, just to tell you how powerful and really how prideful that our work and approach is. They wanted to understand, what is the experience when a neighbor who's currently accessing those public benefits, what is the experience? Are the correspondence or those letters just too confusing? And how can we make those adjustments? And so one of our outreach managers has has spearheaded and led those conversations for almost 2 years in partnership with Legal Aid and our Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services. So they wanted to take it a step further today. We had a visitor from Florida, Atlanta, and Columbus from the federal level, state level, and also local level to understand the experience. So as professionals in this work, what has been our experience? But also we were able to also bring in 4 of our neighbors that we work with, who Carolyn directly supports, to really hear from them, to see examples of letters, to make changes and recommendations that will later on support not only those that we serve here in this county, but statewide in all 88 counties. And so just to give you a sense of how committed we are as an organization to garnering feedback from those that we serve, we also know that we always survey our volunteers, we always survey our partners, but a missed opportunity was surveying our neighbors at a frequency that made sense. And so we've done that and really focused on that these past couple of years. So I'm not going to hold you, Carolyn. I just want you to come say hi.
Yes. Today was awesome with them. They gave so much great feedback. And the thought that they put into it, it was just touching. They was like amazed. They was like, oh my God, that is really good. Yes. Because we have people that are still on it, that are using it. And they wanted the word friendly. They wanted to know what would make it easier for them. Right. And I'm going to let you go.
That's okay.
Carolyn, and thank you so much for everything you do. You truly just made my day that you were able to pop on here. So thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks again, Carolyn. And I will just say for those of you on Zoom, to understand how we really remove barriers for our neighbors. We provided Uber rides for 2 of the families so that there would be no barrier in terms of transportation. Unfortunately, we don't have the most efficient public transportation system here, and I don't think that that's a surprise to anyone on the call. I always like a data point in terms of when we think about advocacy and further conversations. Public transportation in some of our neighboring states are, $1 billion or $2 billion. We know the state of Ohio have just made reductions, and it's like 10 million for the entire state. So I don't know where the final budget's going to land, but we have our work to do. So we have ventured into a partnership with Uber, and we're able to provide rides for those that are in need. Yes, we have a mini screening so that it's not everyone calling to request a ride from Uber, but that's just an example to really remove barriers. We actually had a neighbor bring her child with her, and I used my laptop so she can listen to Baby Shark. And we always pivot so that we can accommodate those that we serve. Another best practice in terms of receiving that feedback is to make sure that we compensate individuals for their time. And I'll use the word compensate, but the way that we show our thank you and appreciate their time spent is in the form of a gift card to a local grocery store. So that is how we are still stay within the realm and the appropriateness in terms of operating and being a nonprofit and being good stewards of financial resources, but really being thoughtful about that invaluable feedback and the time taken and the coordination that many of our neighbors have to do that sometimes exceeds what you and I have to go through on a daily basis. And so wanted to also share that approach with all of you today.
Thank you so much, Tiff. And I think you highlighted so many different things in that conversation in terms of just the heart and the empathy and the active listening skills that go into all of the work that you and your team do, but also the strategy and looking at the data points and really making smart, calculated decisions and evaluating your efforts and seeing where there is more opportunity or room for growth or way to change and do things, and also making sure that all voices are heard. Across the scale. So on all of those touch points, thank you so much. You talked a little bit in terms of advocacy, and we recently had Noelle and Kimmy on the line with us. Do you have any anticipation if some of these advocacy efforts and public benefits that we've seen, public health emergency benefits that are out there, when those stop, any anticipations or guesses of what that's going to look like for our clients and those that we're serving?
Yes, and I will be mindful of time, but I will summarize because we are deeply concerned and have been a part of, once again, statewide efforts to not only prepare the community, but think about the grocers and other organizations and partners that need to also be equipped and train and understand how to direct those that they serve. For example, some of you might have heard the presentation from Kimmy and Noel, and we like to call it the Unwind. Unwind means we're really preparing for the end of those federal resources that many of our neighbors have had access to. So for example, if you're an individual who receives SNAP benefits, those food stamp benefits, you've been receiving the maximum allotment, meaning based on the number of individuals for your household, you could be eligible for, example, a family of 3 could have received $600 since the pandemic, since this was integrated at the beginning of the pandemic. Well, when the public health emergency expires, which I believe will be in the next 60 days. We're still waiting to hear the final from the federal government. You would have that same household lose $300, for example, because of based on the income, based on some other household calculations. Now, I will say, couple that with inflation, food shortages, increased cost of gas, and for a family who's already struggling and on a fixed income, us as food banks have tried to understand what will the increased need be in terms of food access. But this, taking it a step further, it's the whole, looking at the whole picture for those families that we serve, right? So if you have a loss of $300, you go to the grocery store, if you buy the same items, and we know, I think it's close to 10% now is the increase in terms of food costs. And you're thoughtful that if you have a vehicle to drive and gas is $4.50 almost for in some communities, you just don't have enough to get by. And so we're then making those, helping to connect with those resources to say, well, since you have lost $300, here are additional places to go in your community. So we equip individuals with what other places to access free food. We then will provide resources in terms of clothing. So that's if your child had a growth spurt, for example, which is common, right? If your child has a growth spurt, instead of you spending dollars to access clothing, go to your Goodwill or go to your community organization in terms who might offer free clothing, and start there so that you can really have the financial resources on what's not available in terms of the local nonprofit or social services community. So that is an example there. Also, we are mindful there's going to be changes not only to those SNAP recipients, but to Medicaid, which is the free health insurance. We are concerned that in the state of Ohio, we are going to have approximately 50,000 households that will be wrongfully disenrolled. And when I use the word wrongfully, just to give you a little sense of the process, individuals are starting to receive recertification, meaning they have to verify if there's any changes of income, changes of members in their household, any change of circumstance. They then have to complete an application, which is almost 10 pages, and it's very confusing. They then have to get that back to their local Jobs and Family Services office. Now, what we've experienced is that many people are confused by these notices. That's why we were part of a statewide work group to change that. But also the access points on the correspondence, it doesn't give you all of the pathways in terms of emailing this information and faxing this information. So it's very disturbing that unfortunately it's not reflective that you can use electronic ways in terms of getting that documentation. It speaks to individuals having to actually travel to their local Jobs and Family Services office or call a statewide number. And the average hold time, if you live in Cuyahoga County or a metro county, is 3 hours. So think about that for a moment. If I'm a neighbor who might have a free cell phone or a minute phone, for example, where only a certain amount of time I can't go over that talk time, 3 hours will exhaust my talk time, or my battery might die. But I will just say, when you and I call Verizon or AT&T or to access a service, there's no way we would stay on hold for 3 hours. And so this is just a part of our team to help minimize that wait time. We have a dedicated line that we work with Jobs and Family Services to try to mitigate some of that. We also know that children, if you have children in your home, the federal government, we no longer have the ability to distribute what's called grab and go meals. And so throughout the pandemic, food banks have flexibility in terms of going to where children are located in our communities. So we used our mobile unit, our outreach truck that we operate, and we went to different communities. Glazer mentioned her husband. We partner with their school system to distribute grab and go meals, which for those of you who are unaware, that allows for reduced stigma. That allows for parents to actually come and retrieve those meals, even if children are not with them. And we're going to begin to operate as we did pre-pandemic, which means an approved site. So a library, for example, is a good one. Metro Parks locations this year will be a newer partnership in ways to feed our children. But it's congregate style seating, which means you have to come in, you have to write your name down or be checked off. You have to sit at a table. You have to eat every food content in front of the approved site manager, and then you are permitted to leave. Now, I will tell you that is not, we've heard it loud and clear from our children. There's so much stigma associated with it. They don't want their peers in the library seeing them go to retrieve a meal from the food bank. That's not a cool thing for our youth. And so while we've done a lot of advocacy with state and federal organizations, the powers that be unfortunately decided that we needed to go back to pre-pandemic ways in terms of how we ensure that children receive the food that they so desire and deserve. So there's just a lot of things with the end of the public health emergency around public benefits, the way that we distribute food and feed our community, that will go back to some of the complexities and really compliance related approaches to make sure that we can continue to serve our community. So we are absolutely concerned.
Thank you so much, Tiff. And I know that that is something that we could probably talk about for hours on.
We could.
And if anyone wants a follow-up conversation, Tiff and I are both very open to having that. But thank you so much. It's and just all of the work that you and your team are currently doing to try and get ahead of things, as well as just the planning. Thank you. I see a few questions coming through, so please keep those coming through, and we will get to those in just a little bit. But Tiff, would you, I know you're at the Euclid Pantry. Would you want to go ahead and show us around, and then also just kind of talk a little bit about the background of how this came to be?
Sure. So please forgive me, but this is a live demo. As a response to the pandemic, our research team conducts what's called a gap analysis or assessment to understand the needs that are underserved. The way we define underserved is that there's not a good amount of feeding partners in a community, and being thoughtful about the type of grocery stores, if any, that are available in the community. And so after that research, the city of Euclid, which I believe most of you are aware of our large location on South Waterloo, we were able to identify a location about 5 minutes of driving to our current site. So I am currently at the the Euclid Neighborhood Pantry, which is a very special place in the community where we treat our neighbors with respect. We also have an approach in terms of allowing individuals to shop so that they can receive what they need for their family. So I'm just going to do a walkthrough to give you a sense. This is our lobby area. We also like to keep things very organized. So we also have a ticketing system, so we understand it's important. We don't want a neighbor to feel that someone has cut them in line or being served before them, despite of the variety of product that we start each day with. And you'll see that yesterday, Wednesdays are 6 hours days, which is longer for us. We served 168 households in that 6 hours, which in terms of our partners and their ability to serve the community, this is now the second largest distribution point of all of our partners after our weekly Muni lot distribution. And make sure you put that in the parking lot, Glazer, and I'll be glad to speak to that for those of you who might not be aware. But just to show you, we always have resources. As I described the Medicaid changes, we always have information to really draw attention for our neighbors. Clearly, we'll always have safety guidelines. We do still require masks. We're working to understand, should this be mask optional or not? Words of affirmation, positive affirmation is so important for our neighbors. We have some individuals that need that whim of hope. So I'll just read you this because many of our neighbors shared that they love to come in just to hear this quote or read this quote. Ability is what you are capable of doing. Motivation determines what you do. Attitude determines how well you do it. If you believe in yourself, anything is possible. Also, 8 powerful words for the day. Once again, encouraging our neighbors is also a part of the approach here. 8 powerful words for the day. Believe in yourself, believe you can and you will, stay strong, never give up, be grateful, work hard, stay humble, be kind, and keep smiling. We also have community resource board. We have some neighbors that are entrepreneurs, and so they have the ability to place their own businesses so that community members can see and learn more. So as we go through, we have a partnership. We talked about partners with the Kids Book Bank, where we're able to distribute and make sure that each child that comes into the Euclid Pantry has access and has a book in their home. We know that there's a lot of data around the importance of having books in your home. And we know that unfortunately there are many families that just don't have books in their home. So there's always excitement. The children love to come and pick books, or even parents. So in terms of when I say it's a choice pantry, we have, for example, we have some salmon here, and we have a limit in terms of all food items on what our neighbors can receive based on the product that we acquire from the food bank. So there's all types of products. Shelf-stable items are still a great way for our neighbors to feed themselves, while there's also an emphasis on fresh produce. Something cool that we've done here, which is also described as a best practice, it's called SWAP, Supporting Wellness at Pantries. This is a food categorization which encourages the selection of healthy food items for our neighbors. So as we walk through, you will see green, pick often, yellow, choose sometimes, and red, choose rarely. This was adapted from the Connecticut Food Share, which has been a partner of ours in terms of some of those pilot approaches that I referenced earlier. We also have this same guide in Spanish, because that's the second language spoken around our counties. So just to give you a sense of the experience, today we're out of bread for now until closer to 4 o'clock, when we will replenish items. But I just need to show you the need. As I mentioned, 168 households were served, so there's no bread left. Also encourages choose sometimes, but this gives you a sense in terms of the need, in which usually it's overflow of bread and pastry items. With coolers and freezers, there are many that are empty right now, just to give you a sense of the need. Just to also show you some product that we have. And throughout, once again, keeping those positive affirmations at the forefront, we still have stay inspired, think positive, and other positive affirmations. So just to give you a little bit more about the pantry, for those of you, some of you might have volunteered here. If not, we'd love to have you. We are available here 5 days a week for a variety of hours. One thing that we're committed to is not being open when partners within a 2-mile footprint are also open. So there's all type of hodgepodge of hours for you to come and volunteer. Even if it's not a time frame that we're open, we are supported about 12 volunteers during each shift. So that gives you a sense. Wednesdays are the only days we have 2 volunteer shifts, being 11 to 3, and then 3 to 7. We're thoughtful. We want to have evening options and also weekend options. So we're open 2 Saturdays a month, because there's a partner close by that's available the other Saturdays that we're not open. So I'm going to go back to my seat. I'm sure there will be questions about the pantry, as there's just a lot of excitement. We were actually able to execute a board meeting here a few weeks ago. And because hunger doesn't stop, while I thought I was going to, well, I knew I was definitely going to serve someone here. But what I didn't realize is that 8 seniors are directly across the street. Once they saw the activity here, it confused them. Even though they said, I know you're not open until 4, but the lights are on, there's all these cars. And we had 8 seniors come to be served because they said they just didn't have anything. Well, we're not going to not serve people because of a board meeting, right? So, me being Tiff, I have a lot of energy, passion, and dedication to the community. I stepped away from the board meeting and began to serve our neighbors during that hour and a half time period. So, you know, hunger doesn't stop.
No, it sure doesn't, but neither do you and neither do we, right?
Well, yeah, you know, we another time, right? Another time. So all this actually is a great place that will help inform us of approaches and what we intend to execute as a part of our expansion. And so stay tuned. We're happy to keep this group informed, but many of our approaches and practices, also hiring structure, we've hired a community member to be the coordinator here, which really speaks volumes, right? So that is really helping someone with their long-term sustainability, but it's also someone that the community trusts and has a relationship with. And so that's just really important approach that we intend to execute at our South Waterloo facility, which once we move into our new Point Road building, we will then operate a client services or neighbor services center, which will operate a large choice pantry located in our repack. For those of you who have supported in our repack or been to the food bank. And then we will operate and work with other external partners so that it's truly a one-stop shop model. And so we're really excited, a lot of planning, a lot of discussion, and a lot of surveying. For that process alone, we sent out 15,000 surveys to understand what services does our community want to see at that location. Sure, I have my TIFisms in terms of what services I think, and while I'm confident, and I was pretty spot on, but there was other information that we acquired from our neighbors, and that's so important, right? So yeah, I will stop there, and because I realized that there might be another item or even time for questions.
Yes. So actually, I don't think you saw the questions ahead of time, but one of them you briefly touched on. I was so thrilled to see when you showed our partnership with the book bank and the books. We do have a question. Well, one comment first is that folks really like the grocery carts. So kudos for that. And the other question that I want to point out right now is what is your experience with literacy issues impacting food security and other social determinants?
Absolutely. So we recognize, and this is a two-part question. We are mindful of the literacy or lack of literacy for caregivers and parents. There are some times where we have to read paperwork to individuals, or there's comprehension issues. And so our team has been trained to make sure that we're non-judgmental, but we're mindful of that. But there's also literacy amongst youth. And so we know how critical the first 3 school years are for children in terms of kindergarten, first and second, particularly focused around the 3rd grade reading guarantee that we have here in the state of Ohio. So I will say, as I described, it's just to continue to encourage families and support parents. If you have a 3rd grade or 4th grade education as a parent, walking your child through school career can be very, very overwhelming. So we are sometimes working with organizations who offer like a PEP, which is positive education program, for example, who are able to help parents navigate through some of the complexities and really skill build and work on their own literacy while also working with the child's literacy, for example. So, I don't have the data in front of me, but I will say it's something as our gesture to make sure each child has a book in their home goes a very long way. It allows for parents and children to read together. It also encourages children to see books and want to have more books in their home. It's almost become like a competition for some of our children that are here often because we allow neighbors to shop here on a weekly basis, which is a best practice and one of the requirements when you talk about a choice pantry. And so that has really helped families financially because families are receiving $100 to $150 worth of food at each visit, or at least has access to that if they elect to take all of the items. We also have non-food items. So as you saw the books, we also have diapers. Now, I will not say formula because there's a hot need for formula because of the recall issues, but we are working on a strategy countywide to receive formula, work with our local WIC offices, which is the Women, Infant, and Children program, who manage and support the statewide WIC support, which is the free formula and free food item, free child-friendly items for children. And so literacy is an issue. We know with the pandemic, we are waiting to understand test scores and really, with the second year of some communities being back in person, but some children are still at home. And so that is yet to be determined. But what I will say in terms of the food need, many of those that we serve have issues and challenges around literacy. So coupling them to organizations who specialize in that area is a key component in terms of intervention.
Thanks so much, Tiff. And I know so much of your work with Family Connections probably helps a lot as well, with just all the other organizations that you're a part of and just making those connections.
Yes.
We're all out here doing really good work, and that partnership is just so critical, and having those just natural kind of connections is a significant help. Another question from the audience. You talked a little bit about stigma. Can you talk a little bit about how to help overcome that?
Sure. So, first, I think that when we first started to onboard our partners, and this is all food banks, but I will speak about Cleveland, anyone could come and be a partner of the food bank. A little church pantry in the basement of a church, as long as you had your 501c3 as a nonprofit categorization, we appreciate the partnership opportunity. But we recognize and heard loud enough that if it doesn't have the physical attributes that you and I would appreciate in terms of accessing food, just because someone is lower income or poor or in need, we want the same physical attributes to exist. Welcoming, colorful, words of positive affirmation. So we have been thoughtful about not only partner selection, but going back to some of the partners who've been longtime partners and providing grant opportunities so that they can spruce up their places where individuals will come as well. Another thing to keep in mind is education. We do a lot of education to understand the function and purpose of a food bank, but then our partner organizations as well. And so it is our job to make sure that neighbors don't think that this is for a certain population. We've had some people think that you've had to fight in a war. And so there's a lot of myths around accessing food from a food bank, but really the approach. So even if the same church basement pantry that I mentioned, it is a requirement that you have a welcoming approach for neighbors. And so that helps reduce some of that stigma, but it also reminds individuals to be treated with dignity and respect, which then word of mouth then says, hey, go to this pantry because they treat you nice. They have other resources. It's a pretty clean environment. And so that is what we're currently activating within our partner network to make sure that they have that same approach. But education. I can't speak to that to help our neighbors understand. Unfortunately, the need is so great that they're not alone. That goes a long way. But then also helping introduce those other supports also helps reduce some of that stigma as well.
Yeah. When I think of our children and our seniors in particular that we're serving, because there's certain stigma that's related to both of those ages in particular. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think of our seniors that have never once needed help before. And I mean, that just breaks my heart to have someone be in that type of having never needed help before, not knowing where to turn and not knowing that this is what we're here for. And so, and then I think about the example that you shared about the kids, and as a youth, it's not cool to go get the free food. Right. So really just trying to help kind of dispel those, and also being a very welcoming, opening organization. I mean, I remember being at the Muni lot early on, and folks kind of had their heads down, and it was just heartbreaking to see all the thank you signs, though, that we started to see that were held up. Yeah, but again, I think it goes back to you and your team, and just like you said, the education, but also just the warmth and the friendliness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we make sure to have conversations with volunteers about having that same spirit and same approach, You mentioned the Muni Lot. So as a reminder, since March of 2020, we have operated a weekly mass distribution, where unfortunately our weekly average in terms of serving the individuals that come for the drive-through distribution is still hovering at 2,000 households every Thursday. Today is the day. We'll begin here in about 7 minutes, if we haven't started early, but we'll be at the Browns tailgating or City of Cleveland Muni Lot, where we are offering our large drive-through distributions, which was a start, which was launched as a great no contact way for our neighbors to receive food. Now we know, or I know, and you know that it might not always be wise to drive to downtown Cleveland. When we think about the high cost of gas and really just thoughtful there, the way we've mitigated that is to make sure neighbors know of other places that they can access similar product. If you pass by 16 different feeding sites to get to the Muni Lot, you sometimes you defeat the purpose. But we also are mindful that there's other product because of our relationship with grocers associations and food distributor organizations, where product goes straight to the Muni Lot that might not go to a partner organization. And so we're really working hard to source food items so that it is an opportunity for all partners to have access to all of the items that we might not normally have on our shopping list for partners that are directly driven to the Muni Lot distribution.
Yeah. And both the Muni Lot, so and just to kind of highlight that a little bit, we're still averaging about 2,000 families every single week. So every single Thursday afternoon, if anyone's ever going down 90 and you're wondering what that car line of cars is, it's the Muni Lot. I mean, I think we were on the news in early March, mid-March, because it was just gridlock of all of the cars that were kind of around the food bank. And the fact that that's still going on. I mean, this is May 2022. And so, yeah. Two more questions. I mean, if anyone else has any other ones, please feel free to send those over, but also want to be mindful of time and get us out of here right at 1. Do you have to live in our service area to use the call center?
No, great question. So because we are equipped to help anyone statewide, and we've actually received phone calls from neighbors who live in other states, and we're able to do our search and get them to the proper food bank. But I will say that absolutely you can live in any of the 88 counties. We will either provide the service directly, or we will reach out to our sister food banks to make sure that they're served accordingly. And it just depends on the level of services that a food bank might offer. We recognize, as I mentioned, we're always one of the trailblazers. And so we want to make it simple for our neighbors. And so we'll serve them at that time, and then we'll educate them on who to call next time close to their community. Another piece that I did not reference is our work to our formerly incarcerated, which are individuals who've been in the prison system. We have staff stationed there at 9 institutions throughout the state of Ohio. So some are outside of our service area, but that is the agreement that we're under with other food banks that support that initiative as well.
Thanks so much, Tiff. And then one more question, and then we will wrap up. What is one of your biggest takeaways from your time at the food bank?
Oh, wow. You know, I took for granted, I spent 12 years at a partner organization of the food bank. I took for granted of the true operation that we operate at the Greater Cleveland Food Bank. So for me, it's really important, you know, being the social service arm expert of the food bank, how do we keep distribution at the forefront, but how do we integrate an approach that's actually working? So while we're seeing small levels of impact, how do we continue to press forward and have long-term goals so that we can really improve the conditions of the community that we serve? So I will say just executing our mission. The takeaway has been the food bank's a premier place. We have fantastic supporters like all of you. The philanthropy has been phenomenal. We've definitely been recipients of support throughout the pandemic, and wanting to make sure that we plan that accordingly so that we can continue to serve the community and operate at an increased capacity because of our expansion. So there's so many takeaways, but definitely just a reminder of the operation, the great work that we do, and our commitment to the community. We will never change that.
Thank you, Tiff. And one more question just came in. So if you don't mind.
Sure. No, I don't.
In the pantries where neighbors can select their own items, were you surprised by any trends in food selection?
I wouldn't say surprised, and that is why that shopping categorization that I showed you was critically important to help neighbors who were solely reliant upon canned goods and shelf-stable items broaden their horizon in terms of food selection. We also, on Wednesdays, which is our 6-hour day, we have local chefs that come in and do food demos. And if they're not available, we still throughout the week offer recipes for things that our neighbors might not be familiar with, like a lentil. That's a great example. We had an overflow of lentils, and we saw our neighbors just walking past, and then we put the recipes, we had conversations, then it became more of an item that they're more familiar with. So I wouldn't say surprise, because that is something that the community members say it preserves. It's longer to definitely have a pantry full of canned goods in your home, but we've been able to introduce fresh produce for community members that would not have access if we weren't offering those types of food products. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Well, just to conclude, Tiff, you already kind of stole a little bit of my thunder in terms of inviting folks over to the Euclid Pantry. Yes. So if anyone ever wants to come volunteer at the pantry, you want to come for a tour, you want to come see Tiff or Carolyn, who we briefly had a chance to meet kind of in action, and just have a chance to chat with them. This is an open invitation all throughout the year. If you ever have an interest in coming, please reach out. You have Kate Domingo's contact information, so please reach out and contact her. But we would love to kind of show you around and continue the conversation. Also, for anyone that is a reader here with us on the call today, Tiff, do you have it? There we go. Do you want to quickly give that offer for me?
Sure. So I will just say that this Reinventing Food Banks and Pantries, which is actually authored by Katie Martin, who's one of the leadership for the Connecticut Food Institute, who we adapted that shopping model. This really describes nicely on our vision and reasons that food banks have to change their approach. The good news is we're a step ahead of most. And really, it's about a paradigm shift away from solely distribution of food, but being thoughtful to incorporate those strategies that really move the needle and address those root causes of hunger. So we have a few copies, but you can also feel free, if you're wanting to buy this on your own, you can go on and just Google Reinventing Food Banks and Pantries, New Tools to End Hunger. And I said tools to End Hunger by Katie Martin. And it's a really good read, really easy read. The font's big, there's different pictures and things. But I would just say it speaks about neighbors throughout through multiple states with their experience, but what needs to change. And then those neighbors that have actually had an opportunity to be a recipient of food banks like us who have that paradigm shift.
Thank you so much, Tiff. So if anyone is interested in that book, we'll make sure to include a link in the follow-up email that will go out. We do have a couple of copies, and we would be more than happy to send you one as well. So if you are interested, again, just respond to Kate or let me or Tiff know. We would love to send you a copy of that book just because it really helps. It is very enlightening and just is a much deeper dive into the work that's being done. I just want to thank everyone so much for being on the phone with us today, being on the call, being here in person. Tiff, for you taking an hour out of your day between the big meeting that you had earlier today and really kind of sharing our work to really just kind of more on a micro level, sharing everything that you and your team do at the Help Center. Just thank you so much. And thank you for your positivity and just for everything that you do. It means the world to both your colleagues as well as those we serve. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing folks next month as we dive a little bit deeper into the nutrition aspect of things. And again, Tiff, you did a great job leading into that in terms of the recipes, the cooking demonstrations, all of those things. So looking forward to seeing folks next month as well. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you all.
Bye. Thanks, Tiff.